All right, Dan, ready?
On your mark, get set, go!
Pete Hoblive, talk is cheap. Some people are claiming that breathing the exhaled or recycled air through the mask or face covering that you're wearing can lead to CO2 poisoning. In tonight's episode, we're going to look into that, do some math, get your pencil and paper ready. We're going to have an interesting discussion about what's going on. Of course, with me, as always, is Dan. And Dan, I know that you and I land kind of on different sides of this at the end. Spoiler alert.
Sure do.
So we might get into some interesting debate. We'll see if I can make it through the full episode without Dan throwing me out of the studio.
And I still have one episode to film yet. So.
Yeah, we fit this in right. So he's screwed. He's stuck with me for the next episode anyway. So CO2 poisoning. I think most of us by now have heard about this gal out east that crashed her car. The cops said, oh, wearing a mask. They passed out and crashed. And Dan, right before the show, shared this thing allegedly over in Asia somewhere. A couple kids within a week of each other wearing a mask dropped dead in gym class. You know, let's look at this and let's take a step back. Let's kind of like see if things make sense. Okay. So let's start. Dano, what is CO2 poisoning?
Carbon dioxide.
Right? Simple enough. This occurs when you breathe in high concentrations of carbon dioxide, right?
Yep.
So according to the internet, which we know is always fact-checked and always right.
Wikipedia.
Yeah, Wikipedia. The most common causes of carbon dioxide poisoning occur when working in small, poorly ventilated spaces, such as basements, sheds, closets, storage tanks, and mines. In those cases, a lot of times the carbon dioxide displaces the oxygen. So you actually suffocate because there's too much carbon dioxide. You start getting carbon dioxide poisoning, the oxygen levels drop, and then, you know, you need oxygen to survive, right?
Wrong.
Wineries, breweries, and cellars, wine cellars are also concerned with this because the fermentation process produces CO2 when you get the bubbles, right? Carbonated beverages. Dan, you probably don't drink soda anymore, do you?
Oh, I do. Actually started drinking root beer again.
Yep. Well, you know what? Every time you take a sip of that, you're putting carbon dioxide right into you, man. Just want to let you know that.
Oh, yeah.
Anybody ever been to a rock and roll show where they use dry ice instead of the fog machines? Dry ice, that's carbon dioxide. You put a big block of dry ice in a room, you let it cook off, and you're playing around in a little smoke, if you will. You can have problems with that. And here's one that was interesting to me. They found that's from sleeping in a tent or with the blankets over your head at night can cause CO2 poisoning.
Well, yeah, who sleeps with a blanket over their head?
Some do, I guess. You know, I guess I've done winter camping and cold weather camping where I've done that too, but haven't had any problems. So, and I do want to say that there is kind of a level here. There's what they've distinguished as carbon dioxide intoxication and then carbon dioxide poisoning. So as the concentration increases, you go from intoxication to poisoning. So mild symptoms, we'll call this carbon dioxide intoxication. It starts when the concentration reaches 1% carbon dioxide of the air that you're breathing. Typically, the air that we inhale has very trace amounts, 0.04% carbon dioxide. So we're already breathing in a little tiny bit. It's almost like negligible, but not quite. Mild symptoms include muscle twitching and spasms, hand flapping. Maybe Trump was suffering from carbon dioxide poisoning. Sorry. Your skin flushing, so flushing red and stuff, and then reduced alertness. So you get a case of the dumbs, right? You're bumping into stuff and things like that. So those are mild symptoms, okay? Severe symptoms begin when the concentration reaches about 5%. Okay, this is when you're going to start getting your headache. You're going to start getting more significantly disoriented. You're going to start to hyperventilate, right? You're going to be trying to breathe in. You know, your body's going to say, "Hey, I'm not getting enough oxygen, or I'm getting too much this. We got to get more oxygen into us." So you're going to start to hyperventilate, and then lethargy or just general malaise, lack of energy, laziness, whatever you want to call that. Fatally, a fatal exposure to carbon dioxide occurs when the concentration reaches 10%. Okay. So, normally the air we breathe, like I said, has trace amounts. The air we exhale has about 4%. So when we get up to 10% carbon dioxide, you're going to lose consciousness in under a minute, and then death will soon follow. Okay. So that's kind of like what I wanted to take us through is from intoxication to poisoning, what to expect, the symptoms and whatnot. So for those that know me, for those that don't, I'm a numbers guy, man. I'm an engineer. I'm a schooled engineer by trade. I've been through advanced calculus, differential equations, statistics. It's been 20 years, so don't ask me to do any of your math homework for you. It's been a while. But I am still pretty dang good at algebra. And for those folks that say, what do I ever need algebra for? Well, of course, it's for calculating recycled carbon dioxide in masks when you wear during an alleged viral pandemic, Dan. How do people not realize that? So, again, get your pencil and paper ready if you want to keep track. Would really love to hear in the comments, too. There's probably some math geeks out there. Admittedly, I'm going to say right now that this is a very general ballpark approach. Didn't get into the finer intricacies. I felt that they were insignificant, but I would love to hear in the comments what's wrong. And perhaps in the future episode, I'll be eating some crow. Well, we shall see.
Oh, hell no.
I talked about the air that we inhale. The air that typically, it does vary at elevation. The air that we breathe is approximately 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, right? Nitrogen is the most abundant gas in our atmosphere. 1% argon, that's a noble gas for those chemistry buffs out there, and carbon dioxide about 0.04%. So 21%, 78, 1%, 0.04. Now, we breathe in, we exhale. What we're exhaling is about 16% oxygen. So we're only using, 5% of, well, that's more than 5%. We're using more, anyway. We're reducing the oxygen content by 5% when we exhale. Nitrogen stays the same. Isn't that interesting, Dan? We take nitrogen in, hold it, and let it go. Doesn't really do anything. It's always there. But where we see the spike is we get carbon dioxide. We exhale that. That's what the plants want, right? Plants are farming us, by the way, right?
Farming us?
Yeah, right?
What are you talking about?
Trees and plants.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, we exhale what they breathe, and when we die, we're their food.
But too much carbon dioxide is climate change, I guess.
Well, yeah, but that's great for the plants, not for us, right? So anyway, the plants will adjust that.
Yeah, more plants.
We're being farmed by plants, ladies and gentlemen. And of course, some water vapor. Anybody that's ever complained about fogging up glasses, goggles, things like that, that's the water vapor. That's the warm water vapor that's causing that. So again, exhale, oxygen 16%, nitrogen 78%, carbon dioxide 4%, and water vapor. So what I did is I did a little experiment in my above ground laboratory.
Above ground?
Yeah.
So you upgraded.
Well, I say it's above ground because I think in the video you might be able to see a window in the background. I didn't want to say it was underground if it wasn't. Also known as my kitchen, okay? So for those following along. So there's lots of different masks. I'm going to focus on the 3-ply surgical mask because that is what everybody's been recommended to wear, that or a cloth mask. Cloth masks, way too much variation in design, fabrics, weaves, all that stuff. We're going to take your standard surgical mask you can get for 50 cents, 60 cents, online, anywhere. You'll see a ton of these out there. You see a ton of people wearing them. So we're going to look at those. So that's what we're going to test, a standard 3-ply surgical mask. We're going to make some assumptions here, Dan, that's going to come into play at the end. We're going to assume that the mask makes a tight seal around our face, okay? And that there's no air exchange of fresh air and exhaled air happening in the gaps, okay? We're going to make that assumption, and that's just for calculating purposes. We're looking at worst case scenario. I wanted to get worst case scenario here. We're going to evaluate the tidal volume of your lungs. That means that is the average volume of air that an average person inhales and exhales while resting. Okay, so think of yourself, you're sitting on the couch, you're watching a movie, you're laying in bed, really relaxed. What's that volume of air that you inhale and exhale? And that's about approximately 0.5 liters or a half a liter. Okay, I can convert to English or American Standard if you want. I'm not going to because metric system is superior, and we're the only idiot country that still doesn't use it. I told you I was a math guy. Metric rules. So we're also going to assume that the volume of air, of exhaled air that your mask is retaining is 0.12 liters. Here's my only conversion. That's a half a cup. And that was based on an at-home experiment I did in my above-ground laboratory, AKA kitchen. It's a great reason to clean the kitchen because I had pictures and photos. So what I mean, Dan, by the recycled air in this mask, okay, I've got the standard 3-ply surgical mask. Let me hold that out there. There's no tricks, nothing up my sleeve. This is something that was just purchased from Amazon, okay? And so what I mean by this, I'm going to demonstrate how to put this on, okay? First off, I will hand sanitize or wash my hands, okay, nice and clean, right, Dan? All right, thank you, okay, for demonstration purposes only. So then I'm going to handle the mask by the loops, put it on my face, pull it down, and then this little metal bar here, I had it on right, you're going to push this little metal wire over the bridge of your nose, okay? So I'm going to get a little closer to here, and then I will sanitize my hands again, okay? Okay, now I'm all clean. Mask is good. I'm not going to touch the face of it. I'm going to handle it by the ear loops only. So we're going to assume that it's a tight seal across the bridge of the nose and everything so that everything that I'm exhaling is going to theoretically be trapped in this mask, okay? Mm-hmm. And you can see it going in and out as I breathe. So how I determined the volume of that, I'm going to go ahead and take this off now.
Well, you should leave it on the whole show because...
No, I don't want to pass out. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm not going to pass out.
You're all pro-mask anyway.
I'm not. Okay. Oh, damn.
That's right.
I'm going to leave that alone. All right. I'm going to put my earpiece back in here. Okay. So the trick for me was to determine how to say how much potential volume of this recycled air, this 16% oxygen, the 78% nitrogen, 4% carbon dioxide stays in my mask, right? And then I breathe that back in on my next inhale, right? So there's a percentage of that.
Sure.
So what I set up this really cool like experiment in my kitchen at home to try to determine the volume. So Dan, can you scroll down and show just the pictures? This is the equipment. I thought it was kind of fun. We picked some wildflowers earlier in the day with my
dog. That was sweet of you.
I got nearly a two-year-old. This is the first time out in the summer. She's out exploring. She loves flowers. She picked those. So I thought it'd be kind of fun to put them in the picture.
It actually looks pretty good there.
Yeah, not too bad. So on the left, you can see we've got the surgical masks, very similar to the one I just showed you. We've got a bowl of water. We've got a stainless steel, highly scientific stainless steel bowl next to it, and then a measuring cup.
AKA dog dish.
Yeah, right. Yeah, dog watering bowl that I cleaned out for the experiment. So anyway, so what I did, scroll down to the next picture, Dan. Keep going. There's the close-up of the masks. Okay, so what that picture shows is I took a mask and I opened it up and I dipped it in this water, in that bowl of water. Okay. Mm-hmm. So now I've got a volume of liquid in this mask. Now, once I have the mask filled with water, I held it up to my face and I took it and I pressed it in a tight seal. You can see the photo here.
Good way to get waterboarded.
Yeah. Disclaimer, if you're trying this at home, do not breathe when your face is in a face mask filled with water. Okay. That's not recommended. Actually, don't even try this at home, okay? I don't want any of that responsibility. So anyway, I held it there. I pushed it up against my side. I gave it a second for the water to drip out. You can see the bubbles there. And then I poured it into my stainless steel mask water collection container. Right there. There's me pouring it in there. And then scroll down a little, Dan. And then I poured it into a measuring cup. I did this 4 times. And came actually quite close every time to the same one. I also have a very short video. This was kind of done quickly because I had to do it on my phone and send it to Dan. Dan hates it that I did it in portrait, not landscape, just FYI. But I will say that I was not the one behind.
Right?
I was not the one behind the camera, and it was good. So, Dan, fire up that good footage there. And here's the experiment, kind of condensed and fast, but to kind of show you the whole process here of how I determined this.
Putting the mask, or
Yep.
Oh wait, so what? So in layman's terms, just to summarize this, what you just did here.
Yep.
You dunked the mask in the water.
Yep.
Filled it with water. Put it up to your face. And you breathed out?
No, I didn't. I didn't breathe out at all. I held it up there, and what I did is I just displaced the water with my face, right? Because I want to get the volume that the mask is holding, right?
Okay.
So
like a mold kind of.
a mold. Yep. Yeah. Because I went in there and whatever water remained in that mask was basically the volume of air that you would potentially hold back with your mask. And if you look there, it's just under a half a cup, right, Dan? Can you see that?
Yeah, just under half cup.
Yep. Now I did this measurement, like I said, 4 times, and I got about 3/8 of a cup to that's probably about as much as I got out of it. So I decided I was going to use 1/2 cup for my volume of air. Again, worst case scenario. So that's 0.12 liters is a half cup. Now remember, our tidal volume of air, our resting breathing, is 0.5 liters. So really what we've got here is about 0.24%, I think it was. Let me go and check my notes here. Yep. 0.24% of that next air, or that next breath you take, will be recycled from your mask. Okay, so we know that about 1/4 of that next breath you take is going to be your exhaled air. That's comprised of that 16% oxygen, 4% carbon dioxide, and of course, 78% nitrogen. And argon gets processed. There's no argon in it. It's 0.
Wait, so you're using, so you said what percent here?
So you see, okay, so when we take our second
regular inhale.
Yeah, when we take our second breath, we take a breath in and we exhale.
Mm-hmm.
And when we exhale, 0.24% of the next breath that we take at tidal volume is going to be recycled or exhaled air, which is going to be comprised of that 16%, 78%, and 4% makeup. The rest of that air, because when you inhale, you're going to, after you've used up all of the air that you've recycled, you're going to be taking in fresh air behind it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what that means then is that we now have to calculate what's that new concentration. It's no longer 21% and 0.0% carbon dioxide, because we took about 1/4 of that was only 16% oxygen and 4% carbon dioxide. What we are really concerned about is the concentration of gases you are inhaling repeatedly due to mask trapping your exhaled air, right? And we know that the exhaled air makes up 24% of the next breath you take. That's 0.12 liters of exhaled air trapped in your mask over the half a liter, which is our normal resting breath that we inhale and exhale. So to calculate this, we want to know the total gas concentration, a TGA, I coined that myself, of continued breathing with recycled air. So the TGA of oxygen, we're going to look at it on each individual molecule here. We're going to start with oxygen. So OA, which is the oxygen of the air that's around us, times 0.76 plus OE, which is your exhaled oxygen, which is 0.24 or 24%. Because we said, well, 24% of our next breath is going to be this recycled air. Okay.
Right.
So in that first equation, the TGA of oxygen is 21% times 76%, or 0.21 times 0.76, because we breathe in 21% oxygen on a fresh breath of air. And then you're going to add in that approximately 1/4 of 16%. So the new number for oxygen, if you look down there, is when we inhale that second breath, instead of taking 21% oxygen, we're actually taking 19.8% oxygen. So it reduces it by 1.2% oxygen. So you're taking in less oxygen, Dan. Okay. And you can see there, I've got the TGA of nitrogens calculated the same way, the nitrogen in the air. I'm going to throw out nitrogen right now because we know it's 78% in, 78% going out. Doesn't change. So nitrogen levels aren't going to change on us by breathing recycled air. Argon disappears when you inhale it, so your body processes it. So you're actually going to have less argon. You're going to be breathing 0.76% argon in your when you're wearing a mask. And then carbon dioxide. Remember we said we had trace amounts. We had 0.04%. That decimal is 0.004. And plus the exhale there at 4%, that's a quarter of it, puts us at 1% approximately carbon dioxide when you inhale that. So now when we're breathing through a mask, we're taking in approximately 1% concentration of carbon dioxide on our second breath at tidal volume, at resting breathing rate. Okay. I keep saying tidal volume, resting breathing rate, because I think that's going to come into play in our discussion. Okay. So those are some pretty rough numbers. It gets us in the ballpark. We're at about 1% carbon dioxide. So there's the two numbers we want to look at is oxygen, right? Because I think we can agree, Dan, if we don't get enough oxygen, we die.
Exactly.
Right?
Or you could get paralyzed.
Yeah, or bad things happen when we don't get enough oxygen, right? And carbon dioxide, because bad things happen when we get too much carbon dioxide breathing in. Mm-hmm. So those are the two numbers I want to focus on, okay? So let's talk about oxygen first, because I think that we can put oxygen, set it off to the side fairly quickly here. Did some looking into oxygen deficiency and what the percentages of oxygen and what these symptoms are. So when you get down to 15 to 19% oxygen, we're at 19.8, about 20% oxygen. We lost a percentage point. Cognitive and coordination issues occur. Okay. So remember, we're only breathing 21% oxygen. You reduce your oxygen consumption by 2%. And now you've got cognitive, decision-making, judgment, skill problems, and coordination issues. You're going to walk around slurring your speech and bumping into walls kind of stuff.
So you're saying this ain't an issue because it's only 1% reduction versus 2%. Is that what I'm hearing?
What you're hearing from me is that according to my at-home experiment and the calculations I did, we are not reaching an oxygen level that would cause concern for any cognitive or coordination issues.
Because we need 1% more yet.
Yeah, we need to get at least another.
Seems like a pretty scientific test,
right? Well, that's why I showed it. Okay, I do not have the means and capabilities. There are laboratories out there that can do this much closer. But remember, Dan, we assumed that there was a tight seal made on the mask. Okay, right. And I never did get a full 0.12 liters. I just rounded up to a half cup for calculation purposes, just to be on the worst case scenario. So this 19.8% would be the worst case scenario. And we're still 0.8% above what would potentially cause cognitive and coordination issues. And it can go down as low as 15% and still be in that range, which we're nowhere near the 15%. We lost a 1.2%. We got 0.8% left to go before we get into that area. I put some other numbers on there, 10 to 12%. You're going to increase your respiration. Your lips are going to turn blue. Your judgment will become significantly impaired. 8 to 10% oxygen, you're going to faint or pass out. 6 to 8% or less, you're going to die. They say about 8 minutes you'll die. So my thought is, with a total gas concentration of being 19.8%, I don't have a concern with oxygen being the concern here, that we're going to have oxygen deficiency issues. Okay.
Well, we're close, right? You said 0.8?
Well, we're halfway there. We're only halfway there. From the starting point to the point of concern, we're just a little over halfway. So we've still got about halfway to go.
So what happens if you put physical labor into the mix?
Give me a minute on that, okay?
All right. Just
give me a minute. And I'll talk about that a little bit too. So let's take a look at carbon dioxide next. because I think that's where a lot of this is coming from. Because I think that the people that are saying that the masks are causing a problem with people passing out have long since abandoned the oxygen thing. I haven't found anything that it reduces your oxygen level. It's always that it increases your carbon dioxide level. So I think that that's kind of indicative of the numbers that I just threw out there too. So carbon dioxide, let's look at this. What do we say? 0.99%. We'll call it 1% carbon dioxide. So 1 to 5% carbon dioxide, if you're breathing that in, you start to see mild intoxication, okay? You're going to have muscle twitching and spasms. You're going to have hand flapping. Again, we covered that earlier. Your skin is going to flush, and you're going to have reduced alertness at 1 to 5%. Obviously, when you get closer to 5%, those are going to be more severe. You get to 5 to 10%, you're going to have that's where you're going to develop your headache, okay? Your disorientation, you're going to start to hyperventilate. You're going to try to breathe more and quicker. Your body's going to say, hey, I need more oxygen. I'm not getting it. Lethargy, your blood pressure is going to increase. You're going to have an increased breathing and irregular or increased heart rate as well. 5 to 10%. 10% and above, you're going to pass out. You're going to go into a coma. You're going to convulse, and you're going to die, okay? So going back, we have a total gas concentration of 1%. Okay. Now, remember, again, we assumed that the mask was a tight seal. Okay. With no exhaled air being exchanged from the air around us. And we used tidal volume. Now, Dan, tidal volume, resting breath rate, right? When you talk about physical labor, and this is another thing very hard to measure, especially with me in my at-home laboratory, is that when you're walking, when you're alert, you're talking, you're doing stuff, you're actually breathing more than 0.5 liters, right? Mm-hmm. When you and I are sitting here right now, I wouldn't say we're necessarily at resting volume, but we're very close, okay? Because we're not laying on a couch vegging out, or a lazy boy right now vegging out. We're sitting upright, we're talking, we're moving. But when we do physical activity, we take deeper breaths because, you know, that's a much larger volume of air I took in.
And more often.
Yeah, than when I do.
Yeah.
And so it's an equation of what is your body using for oxygen, right? Because your muscles use oxygen, so when you're doing it, it's not going to affect the amount of carbon dioxide that you're taking in or you're exhaling. It's going to affect the amount of oxygen you take in, because your body might be burning it faster than 19.8% can replenish, okay?
Right.
But the carbon's not going to change. Just because you're breathing deeper and heavier, it's actually going to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide that you're taking in, because you're only trapping so much with that mask in front of your face. Once you inhale that mask, and now instead of 0.5 liters, you're bringing in 0.7 liters, you're adding fresh air on top of that, okay? So it's actually reducing the amount of CO2. So the concern there would be is if I'm doing something very physical, exercising really hard, got my heart rate up, my breathing rate's up, and this mask is constricting enough. It's like a constrictor's plate on a NASCAR engine. If you're in a NASCAR at all, they put restrictor plates on their engines so that it restricts the airflow so that they can't go, 200 miles an hour on a...
Oh, like a governor or something.
Yeah, basically like that. And so that's what this mask is doing. It's governing your oxygen, okay? And it's trapping carbon dioxide. So the more physical you get, you're going to have less carbon dioxide, but you have to be careful of this oxygen restriction, okay? So my takeaway from this is that it's very unlikely that anybody will suffer from any sort of CO2 poisoning, okay, that 5% and greater that's going to cause our headaches and disorientation and blood pressure and irregular heart rate. You might experience mild intoxication if maybe you're one of these people whose tidal volumes are 0.4 instead of 0.5. And now that concentration that you're sitting when you're resting is higher than 1% and getting into this area where you're going to notice some twitching and spasming, your hands shaking and things like that. So my takeaway on this is that if you're doing a physical exercise, a three-ply surgical mask is going to do there should be no concern for carbon dioxide poisoning with this. You have to be a little more concerned with oxygen deficiency, which I still find it very hard to believe. And I should have actually set up some equations we could punch numbers in, but I didn't. So you guys can do that at home and post it in the comments. That we could potentially restrict the amount of oxygen that you're taking in, just because you're using more oxygen. That oxygen, that the least amount of oxygen that's getting trapped in there is getting recycled back in. But we still have, again, about half, again, or as much to go as we already did from a resting heart rate. So I still think that from an oxygen standpoint, that it's very low too. The nice thing about this too, Dan, is that when you look at these mild symptoms, and we need to be keyed in on this, is that if we're having coordination issues, if we're starting to see our hands shake and our bodies twitch, we need to recognize something's going on and remove ourselves from that situation and not try to push through it. Okay? So
what if your break ain't until 5 o'clock?
Oh, Bob, say it!
Well, I would talk to your supervisor. Anyway, if you have a concern about that, maybe you've got some underlying medical issues, because that's a huge thing here too, is that if you have underlying medical issues that prevent you from wearing a mask, you shouldn't wear a mask. The catch can be is if you're unaware that you've got a medical issue. So you need to be keen on these cognitive and coordination issues. When you see yourself having trouble with the fine motor skills and you're wearing a mask, recognize that as a signal. Get out of that situation. Go see your doctor. You know, have them run some tests. They have tests out there that'll tell you whether or not all your lung and functions are going well. You know, again, and it's really, if you're seeing, you know, twitching and stuff, you can say something's not right here, but you should be to that point where you can recognize it before it comes to that, serious level where your judgment is impaired enough that you're walking out into moving traffic, or you're passing out, you know, or you're getting headaches and things like that. Part of me, Dan, because when I first, and Dan, I know that this is where you and I differ, is because you feel very strongly that there's some health risks associated with wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And
there's a lot to it. There's, we got to think about the job location, the environment, well, the same difference, what they're doing, the activity.
Yep.
So you're basically saying somebody could jog with a mask on and they're going to be fine, is what I'm getting out of your presentation.
I would agree with that statement, that for the most part, jogging with a mask on would be just fine if you don't have any underlying medical conditions. A 3-ply surgical mask.
I don't think I agree with that at all.
N95 masks are a little different beast, okay?
Right, yes, N95 is different.
Because you've got a filter on there. And if you're not changing your N95 mask out as recommended, that filter becomes plugged, and it makes it harder to breathe in, and it makes it harder to expel air as well. So, and another important thing is that when you're wearing a disposable mask, they're disposable. When you're done with them, get rid of them. Do not reuse them, okay? It harbors bacteria. It could harbor the virus, all of that stuff. Change them frequently, change them often. Be smart about it. Wear your mask appropriately. So, Dan, it seems as though we're not going to land with an agreement here, but we will agree to disagree. I would love to hear in the comments from some of these folks, the math folks out there, tell me what I'm doing wrong. I feel that I've really erred on the side of worst case scenario. So that provides me with a level of confidence that I don't feel that there is, with regular usage of masks, any concern. Don't sleep with a mask on. Okay. If you're sitting, I don't know why you would be at home wearing a mask.
Why couldn't you though? According to your math, you could.
Potentially, but remember we use the average tidal volume. So people are going to fall below that average at some times too, right? So when we're at a resting breathing rate, you should be aware that you may have mild carbon dioxide intoxication. It will never reach the 5% level unless you're, you know, in a completely sealed off room, blankets over your head, you have a larger volume of air. As soon as you hit that volume of air approaching your regular lung capacity, your tidal volume. And if that's all going to be recycled and exhaled air and you're trapping that, yes, over time that will cause some major issues with you. But with a mask, with the small amount of exhaled air, it's actually capturing. And when you breathe in, it's introducing and it's replacing all of that with fresh air when you inhale through it. I don't see it happening. I really don't. I would be very surprised unless you've got underlying medical conditions. Because the mask isn't a tight seal either. There is going to be some air exchange through the seams. You know, if there was no air exchange through it, you would never see people's glasses fogging up or whatever. It would just actually kind of like puff out and like, you know, you'd all over. You'd hear it as you exhaled.
Answer this question to me.
I'll do my best, sir.
Okay, so you wear these masks and the shit exhales on the outside. You're breathing.
Yep, and up the sides of your nose if you don't have
So what good is it if it's still going out in the fucking room?
Oh, from a COVID standpoint, okay. I notice how I didn't bring COVID into this whole damn conversation,
Well, that's
Dan.
what this whole thing's about.
Oh, you're right. That's what it stemmed from, because I had come across some articles saying, oh my God, you can get CO2 poisoning from a mask. And at first blush, my gut was telling me that's impossible. Your breath, your lung is what you inhale is so much more than any amount of air that could be trapped in this mask. Okay. And that's what made me start looking into it. Thought it'd be a pretty interesting topic, especially with side conversations with Dan and his viewpoints on it. I thought it'd be a good way to throw it out there. So I apologize. What was your question again, Dan?
COVID coming out of the sides.
So and this is where we need to understand what
it's okay if it comes out, it just can't come out directly at a person, right?
Yeah, and I'm going to air quote here for those listening on the podcast what the acknowledged authorities say on this COVID is they want you to not spread droplets or spit or whatever through talking, coughing, sneezing. They want you to capture that so it doesn't get out into the air, the fine particulates, aerosoling and all that stuff. Now, Dan, you and I both know they've waffled a little bit in the last month or so.
Oh, yeah.
Saying, you know, maybe it doesn't last as long on surfaces as we thought. And, oh, by the way, asymptomatic transmissions don't seem to be all that common. They're actually quite rare. So they've completely flip-flopped in the last month on some of this stuff too. My personal belief is that when you have a communicable disease that could be passed through mucous membranes and their byproducts, that a mask, if worn properly and handled properly, proper hand hygiene is followed, there can be an improvement and a reduction in spread on that. And that's and I don't want to get too far off of. That's why I was very laser focused with the CO2 part on this.
Yeah, it can stay on that way. I mean, people know my views. I have a video. I'll put that in the link of this video.
Yeah,
as well.
It was an interesting video and got me thinking.
It doesn't pay to regurgitate information here, but like these protests, people wear masks. What do they do when they talk to somebody? They pull them down because they can't hear.
It's ridiculous. And now they got this COVID. If they're sick, they got this COVID on their hands, right, Dan?
Well, apparently it doesn't stay on surfaces, so you're okay.
Yeah, apparently, right? So who knows, Dan? What we do know, Dan, is that nobody knows, right, with this whole COVID.
Yeah, so we're back where we started. We still listen to people that don't know what they're doing.
When you listen to any of these experts, that they work in multiple times, well, we're not really sure. Data's being gathered every day. We're learning new stuff. So it's a swag, right? You know what a swag is? A scientific wild ass guess. Okay. And scientists can be wrong, just like you or me, Dan. They're wrong every day.
Yep.
Okay. So what
they sure are.
So what I was hoping that I could accomplish here is maybe put some people's mind a little at ease that these masks are not going to cause major carbon dioxide related issues.
So you'd be all right putting that mask on. Let's get you on a treadmill.
Yep, I certainly would.
You would?
Well, wait a minute. Hold on. I am woefully out of shape, and you would see me, you would see me like completely decompressed with or without a mask on. And so I don't know if I would be the best person, but yeah, absolutely. Now,
Brooks from work did one, and then he couldn't. he couldn't do it. He said he got way too hot because you're breathing that hot air back in. And it's
Yeah,
just,
you're breathing a little warmer air, about 25% of the exhaled air that
and
you're
I
breathing.
think that, like I said, it depends on what you're doing, and then it's just going to add up. It's all about factors. And what I really get pissed off about what's going on is a lot of companies and other places don't look at all the factors. They just want to cover their ass to make a profit. And that's, again, does somebody have to die to prove a point? And the answer is yes.
Yep. Well, absolutely. I mean, that's like how lawyers stay in business, right? You know, I mean, people die for stupid reasons. That's why I have warning stickers all over every freaking thing we have. I really, to go back about the breathing the warm air in and saying, hey, I can't continue because the air is warm. So if we were to put him in tropical Hawaii and send him running, he would be in the same situation as if he was wearing a mask. So
I disagree on that one.
Really? What it is a product of temperature and humidity. That's what the heat he's feeling.
But
carbon dioxide isn't hot unless it's being warmed by things.
It might be better. It might be the same from a safety perspective, but from I would rather run without a mask than one with one. Because I know I'm going to feel like you're not getting that exhaust. Right? Like no matter where I am in the world.
Masks are uncomfortable. They're inconvenient. They're warm because you are breathing in up to 25% of your exhaled air, which is coming out warmer than the air you're breathing, unless you're in a 98-degree tropical environment running, which is heavy, and anybody that's done any sort of like triathlete stuff or running or biking and stuff, when they get into those hot, humid areas, it's heavy. You feel it in your chest. It's much harder. The only factor that would be different than wearing a mask is that you're taking in about approximately, well, it would be less than that because your volume of air would be greater than your tidal volume because you're not resting when you're running, right? Right. So you would be taking in less than 1% carbon dioxide. So again, even in that situation, you're not going to have carbon dioxide related issues because you're going to be diluting that with so much fresh air with the deep breaths you take. But yes, it will be warmer because you're exhaling warm air and recycling in a percentage of that warm air.
And I think there's a lot of stuff that still has to get measured out. Like, I really do believe there's a time and place for them. Again, if you're in the hospital, obviously, if you're, it's fine. If you have to run into the store and get something and get out, fine. But like, I really disagree with this long-term.
And we talked a little bit about this off camera before the show too, Dan. And a point I made is that there are thousands, if not tens of thousands of people every day go to work and wear a mask of some sort for their entire shift. You head east, you look at the Asian cultures, they're outside, they're wearing a mask, right? And I would really think that if there were, consistent, significant concerns with wearing a mask like this, we would, right now we would be seeing it. People would be beating that up, and people take every opportunity they can
not have it on.
Yeah, to not have it on, to make the government look stupid, right? And make the government look stupid. You would see reports of people, oh my gosh, look at these protests in Minneapolis. All these people wearing face coverings started passing out, and it's not happening. We're not seeing that in the Asian culture.
They'll pull them down.
Yeah, right. They'll pull them down, right? So
or not wear them over their nose. That's the other thing.
The best advice I can give anybody wearing this type of mask, any type of mask, or in general, when you start to feel, your body starts to twitch and your body starts to act differently, you need to recognize something's going on and remove yourself from that situation.
If your job so chooses or lets you.
Well, absolutely.
If they don't, I guess you got to get fired.
Well, I don't think anybody would fire you for doing that, but maybe.
Oh, it's crazy town here.
Yeah, it is. You never know, right? Hey, you left your station because you felt like you're gonna die. I don't know. I think that actually, like, there's workers' comp and FMLA stuff would kick in for that too. It would be a work-related injury, illness if you had to do that, so it would be recordable. Anyway, I digress. Anyway, let somebody know if you're having problems, man, and stop wearing the mask, get to fresh air, and go see your doctor is the best advice you can. The Pete Hallbleib assessment on this is that In very rare circumstances, you might get some mild intoxication, but overall, it's nothing to worry. I'm not exactly sure what this experiment's going to prove, but we're going to do it, and Dan's going to use it against me any chance he gets. So we're going to go ahead and put the mask on. Again, proper mask donning. I just sanitized and washed my hands offset, and I'm going to put this on, handling it by the ear loops. Put this on. We're going to pull it up. We're going to affix the nose wire there, and I'm gonna quick reach over here, sanitize my hands again. Hands are nice and clean. Okay, so what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna run down the driveway, I'm gonna run back, okay? And if Dan has his way, I'm gonna pass out when I get back.
I never said that. You're just gonna have a really hard time.
Okay, here we go. Ready? I gotta stretch out a little bit.
Let me get a wide shot here.
Yep, okay. Oh, yeah. All right, Dan, are you ready?
On your mark, get set, go!
Okay, doing good so far, Dan. Not feeling any breathing restriction. It's, you know, I can feel the warm air in the mask. Still running, doing well. It's downhill, thank you for that. Okay, doing good. We'll get to the corner here, and that'll be about all I got in the gas tank. And we're running. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Want to keep going, Dan?
I can go all day.
Oh, Christ. All right, we'll go a little further. It's amazing I haven't collapsed yet.
Still downhill.
Yep, we're lucky. All right, we'll stop at this big tree up here and see how it goes. Okay, so I'm obviously breathing a little heavier because I just ran. That's the furthest I've ran in about 10 years. I can feel the warmth of the air. It does feel a little restricted, like I'm not getting a good breath back in. Heart rate's increased because I was just running. Overall, I feel okay though.
All right, well, let's run back uphill.
With the mask on?
Yes.
Oh, for crimes.
Because this is where it's really going to get you breathing heavy.
Okay, we're going to just give it a minute.
You son of a bitch!
Just to let the heart rate come in. Okay. Let's hitch the britches here in my state-of-the-art running outfit that I've got. Ready to go back up, Dan?
Let's go.
Here we go. And then we'll see what happens when we get back to the top of the hill. And for those astute viewers, they can see I'm taking it a little more seriously on the way back up the hill because I am gassing already. Alrighty. You holding up all right, Dan?
Good.
I don't think you're breathing heavy. And we're back. Whew. So again, at first, as I inhale, it's not a very, like, oh, there's a possum.
Pleasant inhale,
Yeah,
it?
no, it is. It's actually quite uncomfortable. Now, I will say, if you've got a job that takes you to this level of activity, you might want to consider something else. I'm going to go ahead and take the mask off.
Prove my point. Isn't that better?
Yeah, it's way better.
Yeah.
And I don't think that necessarily the mask is supposed to not affect it. I mean, it's uncomfortable, it's restrictive, and people don't like it. I can see why. I agree. It sucks.
Well, let's think about, like, I showed you the article with the kids. These kids are younger. They're in the gym class. China.
Yeah.
So they got discipline where you do what you're told.
Yeah, if you don't, yeah,
Like,
you push
I
it.
don't think that's not that far out of the question that they collapse because of wearing a mask.
Yep.
With exercise like that.
Yep, we had talked about that, again, off camera a little bit too. And part of my thought is that Asian culture has been wearing masks for a long time. Okay? Now, of
Not
course
in
they
gym
had...
class.
Well, yeah, you're right, yep. But I would think that
if this was a widespread problem, we would hear about it. There would be already stats about it out there.
I think
The
everybody's
second-
too scared.
Could be, or
They don't want to go against the
pressured into
man.
not,
Yeah.
you know, saying stuff, right? I think another thing we have to look at too is that in America, you hear all the time about kids, high school, middle school age kids collapsing during gym classes, during sports practices too, who are not wearing masks. So without knowing underlying medical conditions, it's tough to make that direct correlation. Correlation does not mean causation, right?
Just like the COVID death, folks. Just because you got a lot of COVID deaths doesn't mean they died from COVID.
Yeah.
So there you go.
You got it, Dano.
We learned something.
You little fucker had to throw COVID in there. I was deliberately trying not to